Hello there, my name is Nier, and I'm currently making a game with multiple playable characters. Each character has unique abilities and mechanics. There are a few game modes to play, where by completing the objective you get rewards to help you upgrade your characters and make them even stronger. Well, at least that's the plan for now, since the game is still in early stage. Think about games like Brawl Stars, Overwatch, Valorant, Apex Legends, basically any hero shooter. Except that these games are made by greedy multimillionaire companies that only want all the money you have, and I don't want that yet. There's also the fact that this game is PvE, which is player versus environment, which is just a fancy way of saying single player. I would say this is actually better, because this way you don't have to insult random children online. And that's good. But you get the point. Multiple characters you can play with, they have unique abilities, you defeat enemies, you get rewards, you upgrade characters to make them stronger. Seems good? Awesome. I should also inform you that this is the second devlog of this game, and you should definitely watch the first one because, did you know that only 20% of people watch? The last thing I worked on this game was the environment. It still looks bad, I know, but it looked worse before. I decided that next I should focus on the enemies of the game. You're thinking, shouldn't you work on the multiple playable characters and the progression system? Yes I should. So I decided to model one of the enemies. I kept thinking of which to model since currently there were 3 enemies. Lots of ideas flowing in, and every one of them felt too complex. Eventually, I had an epiphany. A wizard. Not the Harry Potter kind of wizard, the real kind of wizard, with the robe, the hat, and the beard, the most important part of a wizard. I was a little uncertain because not only did I want to make the model by myself, I also want to rig it and animate it by myself. I'm in no means an animator, let alone a good one, but I made a few rigs and animations before. Helicopter! The first thing I did was model the staff. Don't ask me why it looks like that, I don't know, maybe some lore related stuff, I have no idea. And then I modeled the wizard itself. And it turned out pretty decent. I was actually proud of myself to make something that doesn't look insanely bad. I think that alone deserves you to click that subscribe button. And then came the part I was afraid of. Rigging. If you don't know what rigging is, it's adding bones to the model, and those bones allow you to move the model the way you want. That's how animations for characters in video games work. It's very simple if you think about it. You can move your limbs because of your bones, and that's how characters in video games work as well. Not only video games, but also 3D movies. But I'm not here to talk about that. The important part is that I gave bones to the wizard and attempted a walking animation. Yeah, I attempted to make one. But after a bit of improvements, it turned out pretty nicely. After that, I made an attack animation and everything was working well in the game. I didn't have to code anything new because I already had the enemy code done. The wizard alone made the game much better to play because not everything is a capsule anymore. I was happy with the wizard, and so I decided to add a new enemy, which I call the poison enemy. The whole gimmick of this enemy is that it deals damage over time. Basically what that means is that after hitting the projectile, the player takes a certain amount of damage over the next few seconds. Now sure, I could make it deal the whole damage at once, but that's not as interesting. I also made it slower than other enemies to balance it out, but it might be too weak. I'll leave balance for later. Before going to the next feature, I should tell you that at this point in development I was playing a lot of Squad Busters, which is a game with a style and map design I really enjoy. The map for my game is already slightly inspired by Squad Busters, but there's something in that game that really caught my eye. The bridges. So I basically pretty much just copy that. Here's how bridges work. Bridges connect 2 pieces of terrain with an unwalkable area next to them, so you can still shoot but not walk around them. It's good for ranged characters and enemies such as the wizard. It's what I like to call game depth. Depth. I was thinking of where I should put the bridges, and then I realized the map was a bit too small for that. So what I did was maintain the map as the inner island and expand with a bigger island around it that you can only access using bridges. And I mean, look at how beautiful it is. If you haven't realized, I now have water in my game, so I used the shaded graph following a tutorial by this very small YouTuber to make some better looking water. And this meant that I needed to install the universal render pipeline. I still don't know what that means. If you do use the universal render pipeline and notice some of the materials turn pink, All you gotta do is select every material affected and click this button in the edit menu. I only found out about this after changing every single one by hand. After seeing the beautiful water, I improved the looks of the games by adding stuff like trees, stumps and logs to the environment. And this is where I decided to add a new feature to the game, the explosive barrel. You know what they are, they're in every video game ever. The barrels in my game explode when either the player or an enemy hits it, dealing damage to any entity within its range. So barrels can be triggered by the player and the enemies, and deal damage to player and the enemies. Not only that, they also trigger other barrels nearby. Just look at this. The barrels are a nice addition to the game, and they're useful sometimes. Now I know what you're thinking. This devlog was supposed to be about the enemies. Where are the enemies? Well, let me tell you about another enemy that I added. I call it the Lancer. The premise is very simple. It's a melee enemy that after a few seconds will start moving incredibly fast towards you and deal a big chunk of damage on impact. After that, it returns to normal speed until it runs again. It's not that mechanically complex, but it's very unique if you ask me. I mean, it's totally new and never seen anywhere before. Oh, and by the way, I added an indicator for the enemy level. Then I thought it was best to go back to Blender and model some other enemies. In the first version of this game, all enemies were ghosts, and I wanted to bring that back. Definitely not because I'm lazy. I grabbed the old ghost model I had and gave it armor and a sword. Then I rigged it and animated. Everything went smoothly as long as I didn't make the ghost bend their spine. But add some animations and bada bing bada boom, we got another enemy. Well, technically it was the melee enemy I already had, but it feels brand new with the model and animations. Another thing I added was a silhouette for the player and the enemies when behind an object. And I removed some of the bridges because it was very hard to traverse from the middle to the outer island with a lot of enemies. And then came what was probably the biggest change I made. Not that the change is big on itself, but it actually changed how the game feels to play. It was something I was thinking ever since I started, but wasn't sure it was good. It was actually great. Okay, but what was the change, you ask? I made it so you could rotate the camera.
That's it?
As I said, it's not a big change on itself, but it made the game feel so different. It almost felt like a new game, and believe it or not, it made me more motivated to work on it. After all of this, I finally changed the last bit of UI in the game screen that was still default, and that was the damage and the kill counter. I added an icon for both, which are not great looking. I'm terrible with art, but I'll handle that later or get someone to do it. And also add an animation to when the kill and damage count increase, because why not? I felt like I should add another enemy to the game, so I kinda just made another ghost warrior with golden armor and an axe. You can call it laziness, I call it a variant. Mind you that the most sold game of all time has done is like 20 times. I called this enemy the Elite Ghost Warrior. It's a very unique name, I know. And the differences for the normal ghost is that the elite one has more health and deals more damage, but attacks a bit slower. At this point, I modeled and animated 2 out of the 3 enemies I had when I started making the game, so I decided to model the last one. And there was really only one possible choice here. A goblin. Why a goblin, you ask? Okay, that's a good question. But I'll do you one better. Why not? The enemy I needed to model is small, and goblins are small. It all fits. I modeled a simple yet sophisticated goblin with a dagger, and I had one fear while doing this. The legs. You see, I rigged and animated a few enemies in this game already, but none of them have legs. So I need to animate the goblin's legs as well. To make this easier on myself, I used the walk cycle reference I found on Google, and it turned out decent, if we ignore that the leg kind of goes out of the shorts, but that's not relevant. I tested it on game, and it looked nice, so I animated everything else and finished the goblin. Look at all of them running around. I also added a damage text that pops up when you hit an enemy and shows the damage dealt on that attack. And to make the health bar better, I added a heart that even pumps, like a real heart. And this is what 2 weeks of progress on my game look like. I know it's technically been 4 weeks since my last video, but I started recording and editing this one 2 weeks ago. I could just blame it on college, but it's my fault as well. No, actually it's just because of college. I take way too long to edit videos. But if you enjoyed, remember to like and subscribe to help this video reach more people, or maybe even the people who watched the last video and gave up on waiting because they thought I was dead. It's a fair assumption. Either ways, thank you for watching the video. I'm really enjoying how this game is turning out, and I hope you do too. So have a good one, and I'll see you in the next video. How the hell did this happen?